Okay, real talk for a second. When It Takes Two came out in 2021, I almost skipped it because on paper, it sounds like a gimmick. You have to play with a second person. No solo mode, no option. If your friend doesn't own it, tough, unless you use the Friends Pass. And the story is about a couple getting a divorce turned into dolls by their crying daughter. I remember reading that description and going, this is either going to be genius or it's going to be the most awkward thing I've ever played with another human being. It ended up winning Game of the Year. Not Best Co-op Game, not Best Family Game. Game of the Year, beating Ratchet & Clank, beating Resident Evil Village, beating Deathloop, full stop at the Game Awards 2021. And it's sold over 23 million copies since. If you count everyone who played it for free through Friends Pass, we're talking more than 50 million people who've actually sat through this weird, chaotic, occasionally uncomfortable game about a marriage falling apart. So today, I want to actually dig into why. Not it's fun with friends, everyone already knows that. I want to talk about why It Takes Two might be one of the smartest pieces of game design in the last decade, and why calling it just a co-op game is honestly underselling it. Quick setup for anyone who hasn't played it. May and Cody are married. Things aren't working. Their daughter Rose overhears them telling her they're getting divorced, and out of pure heartbreak, she cries onto two little handmade dolls she built of her parents. Magic happens, because video games, and May and Cody wake up trapped inside the bodies of these dolls. From there, a talking self-help book named Dr. Hakim, who is somehow also a relationship guru, tells them the only way back to their real bodies is to work through their issues together, which obviously they hate, and the rest of the game is them fighting their way, literally and emotionally, through a surreal version of their own house and backyard, one level themed around a different piece of their relationship. That's the whole hook. Two people who don't want to be near each other, forced to physically depend on each other to survive. It's not subtle, but it's not supposed to be.
Here's the first thing that actually separates this game from basically everything else in its genre. Most games find one core mechanic and stretch it across 10, 20, 30 hours. You learn to shoot, you learn to platform, you learn the combo system, and then the rest of the game is just remixing that same skill set in slightly harder rooms. It Takes Two doesn't do that. Director Josef Fares has said in interview after interview that he specifically wanted to avoid what he calls the old design rule of finding one mechanic and milking it. His team built something like 25 completely different core mechanics into this one campaign. You go from controlling time to duplicating yourself, from magnetism to shape-shifting into sap, from a level where you're literally the size of an ant to a level where you're driving a go-kart made out of a vacuum cleaner attachment. Almost none of these abilities carry over between chapters. You learn something new, you master it, and then it's gone. And that's a genuinely insane way to build a game from a budget and time perspective, by the way. Every one of those systems needs its own prototyping, its own bug testing, its own balancing pass between two players. Fares has openly said the hardest part wasn't inventing a fun mechanic. You can prototype something fun in a week. It's polishing it well enough to feel good, knowing you're going to throw it away in an hour or two anyway. Why bother? Because Fares has talked about coming from a film background, where a movie doesn't sit on one shot for 2 hours. Something is always happening. He said flat out that he thinks narrative games get repetitive, and that this hurts how many people actually finish them. So instead of asking how do we make players replay this, which he said he actively doesn't care about, the whole design philosophy is built around making sure you finish it once, and that every single scene has a piece of gameplay built specifically to match what's happening in the story in that moment. That's the real trick of It Takes Two. It's not here's fun gameplay, and separately here's a story. The gameplay is the storytelling.
Now, here's where it gets messier and honestly more interesting to talk about because critics did not agree on whether the story actually works. Some reviewers pointed out that beneath the squirrel boss fights and the go-kart chases, this is a game about a marriage falling apart, about a daughter terrified of losing her family, and about two adults who've stopped seeing each other. One reviewer put it simply, it's about decaying love, about not wanting to face reality, about hope sitting right next to uncertainty. But a lot of other critics pushed back hard on how the divorce plot actually plays out. Several pointed out that Cody and May's issues get resolved in a way that feels almost too easy. Cody just needs to pick gardening back up. May needs to sing again. And some reviewers straight up said the couple came across as selfish enough that a divorce might genuinely be the healthier outcome for their kid. One outlet's headline literally said the game made them root for the divorce to go through. And I think that tension is actually the most honest thing about this game. It's trying to take a genre, the will they get back together relationship arc, and jam it into a medium that has almost never touched it. Rom-coms exist by the thousands in movies and TV. In games, barely at all. Ferris has said this directly. He thinks co-op is massively underused as a genre, and that stories are something we naturally experience together, like going to a movie or a concert with someone, and games have mostly ignored that. So even where the writing stumbles, and it does stumble in places, there's something worth respecting in the attempt itself. This is a big-budget, EA-published game that decided its emotional center would be a couple in marriage counseling. Not a war, not a heist, not a chosen one saving the world. That's a strange swing to take with a AAA budget, and it mostly landed anyway. There's also a detail that doesn't get talked about enough. Actual couples therapists and family counselors have used this game as a discussion tool with real clients because the levels map so directly onto relationship dynamics. The cuckoo clock level, where Cody controls time and May can duplicate herself, is built entirely around the idea of never having enough time for each other. The magnet level in the snow globe is literally about attraction, pulling toward and away from your partner. That's not an accident. That's a writer's room mapping emotional concepts onto physical verbs you press a button to do.
Let's talk about the thing people complain about most going in. You can't play this alone, and you can't play it online with a stranger either. It's built for two people, sitting together or at least playing together on purpose. And there is a completely free way in for the second player through Friends Pass. One person buys the game, and they can invite anyone to play the full thing with them at no cost. That's not just a nice consumer-friendly feature. That's the entire thesis of the game wearing a business model costume. The story is about two people who legally, financially, emotionally cannot get anything done unless they're both showing up and pulling weight. The gameplay mechanically forces the exact same thing onto you and whoever you're playing with. If one of you checks out, stops paying attention, stops communicating, you both get stuck. You cannot brute force this game solo, the way you can carry a weaker teammate in most co-op shooters. Split screen even reinforces it visually. You are constantly physically looking at what your partner is doing in the same frame, whether you want to or not. There's no hiding in your own corner of the map. Fares has talked about wanting games where players actually need each other for something unique, not just a spare gun in a horde mode. Every ability in It Takes Two is deliberately incomplete on its own. May might get a hook. Cody gets a nail gun that shoots targets for the hook. Neither ability does anything without the other person's half. So when people say It Takes Two as a tagline, it's not just cute wordplay for the title. It's dead honest about what you're about to sign up for, both as a player and weirdly as the characters in the story.
Here's a detail that I think gets glossed over. It Takes Two didn't just win Game of the Year at one show. It won Best Design at the Game Developers' Choice Awards, Best Design at the DICE Awards, Best Multiplayer Game and Best Family Game at the Game Awards, on top of the overall Game of the Year win there too. Across its run, it's picked up something like 90+ awards total. That's a lot of very different juries, critics, developers, industry voters, independently landing on the same conclusion, that whatever this game does mechanically, it does at a level almost nobody else was doing. Notice none of those big wins are Best Story. The story got nominated for things, sure, but the wins cluster hard around design and gameplay execution, which honestly lines up with everything we just talked about. Critics were divided on the writing, basically unified on the craft. And I think that split is actually the most useful lens for understanding this game's legacy. It Takes Two proved, at scale, in front of tens of millions of players, that you could build an entire AAA release around forced two-player cooperation and never repeat mechanic design, and have it not just work, but dominate an award season against way bigger franchises. That's a real data point for the industry, not just a nice story for a highlight reel.
You can actually see the influence of this design philosophy pay off directly. Hazelight's follow-up, Split Fiction, sold 1 million copies in 2 days, which is faster than It Takes Two managed at launch.
Ferris has been open that he doesn't really care about replayability numbers or building a franchise around one gameplay loop. His stated goal is just that people finish the thing once and feel something while they're doing it. And whether or not the divorce plot fully sticks the landing for every single player, the format, forced cooperation, disposable but polished mechanics, gameplay literally built to match the story beat you're in, clearly connects. So when someone tells you It Takes Two is just a co-op game, what they're actually describing is a game that used its co-op requirement as the load-bearing wall of its entire design. Not a mode bolted onto a single-player game, not an excuse to double the enemy count. The whole emotional argument of the story, that a relationship falls apart when only one person is doing the work, is literally unplayable unless two real people show up and share the weight. You can't experience the theme without living the mechanic. That's rare. Most games tell you a theme. This one makes you and another person physically perform it for 12 hours before it lets you go home.